The day my father locked the front gate while the rest of my family celebrated. Inside was the day I realized that blood alone does not make someone your home. Because I stood outside in the freezing rain holding a small grocery bag with the dessert I had spent my last paycheck to buy while laughter echoed through the windows as though I had never existed. I did not scream, knock, or beg for another chance because something inside me quietly accepted that the people I loved had already made their choice, and from that painful moment forward I promised myself that one day I would build a life where no one could ever decide whether I deserved a seat at the table. My name is Ethan Brooks and I am 30-1 years old. But the man I have become bears almost no resemblance to the insecure young mechanic who once believed that earning his family approval mattered more than chasing his own dreams. Looking back now, I understand that every cruel word they spoke and every door they slammed in my face pushed me toward a future I never would have imagined, although at the time all I could see was disappointment, loneliness, and the overwhelming fear that maybe they had been right about me all along. I grew up in a quiet mountain town in Colorado where my father, Richard, owned a respected construction company that had been passed down through 3 generations, and everyone assumed that one of his children would eventually take over the business. My older brother, Nathan, was the obvious favorite because he graduated from college with honors, wore expensive suits, and could charm anyone into believing he belonged in every room he entered, while I preferred spending my days repairing engines, welding broken equipment, and learning practical skills that left my clothes stained with grease instead of neatly pressed. My mother, Diane, never openly admitted she was embarrassed by my career, yet her disappointed expression said everything she refused to say aloud whenever neighbors asked what I did for a living, because she always found clever ways to change the subject before anyone could hear that her youngest son worked with machines instead of managing an office. Family dinners became exhausting performances where every conversation somehow turned into another comparison between Nathan's success and my supposed lack of ambition, leaving me feeling less like a son and more like an unwanted guest, sitting quietly at the edge of someone else's celebration. Everything finally collapsed during our annual Christmas gathering when I rushed straight from an emergency repair job after helping a stranded family whose truck had broken down on an icy highway, believing that arriving late was better than not showing up at all because family was supposed to understand moments like that. Instead, I found the front gate locked, a small insulated food container sitting alone on a wooden bench outside, or leave without causing a scene, never realizing that his decision would become the greatest mistake he would ever make. The cold wind cut through my work jacket as I stared at that small container resting on the bench, and for several long minutes, I simply stood there listening to the cheerful conversations drifting from inside the house while the colorful Christmas lights glowed like a celebration that I was no longer welcome to join. I slowly picked up the container, walked back to my old pickup truck without looking through the windows again, and drove away with a strange sense of peace because I finally understood that fighting for acceptance from people who refused to respect me was a battle I would never win. The following morning I packed everything I owned into the back of my truck and left Colorado before sunrise, carrying nothing except my tools, a few boxes of clothes, and enough savings to survive for a couple of months if I was careful with every dollar I spent. After driving for nearly 2 days, I settled in a growing industrial city outside Nashville where nobody knew my last name, nobody cared about my family history, and every opportunity depended only on how hard I was willing to work. Instead of who my relatives happened to be, life there tested me in ways I had never imagined because I worked 12 to 14 hours every day repairing heavy equipment for construction companies, often accepting the toughest overnight jobs that more experienced mechanics refused to take. I rented a tiny apartment above an aging auto parts store where the walls were thin, the furniture barely fit inside the rooms, and every paycheck disappeared almost immediately into rent, groceries, and better equipment that would help me sharpen my skills even further. Those difficult years slowly transformed me into someone stronger than I had ever been, because every complicated repair taught me something new and every satisfied customer recommended my work to another business that needed reliable service. Before long I had saved enough money to rent a small warehouse, hire my first employee, and launch a mobile equipment repair company that earned a reputation for solving problems other shops considered impossible, making my phone ring almost every hour with new requests. From clients across the region, 7 years passed faster than I expected, and the lonely mechanic who had once eaten dinner alone in his truck had become the founder of one of the fastest-growing industrial service companies in the state, employing dozens of skilled technicians who felt more like family than my own relatives ever had. I believed the painful chapter of my past had finally closed forever, but one quiet Tuesday afternoon a luxury SUV rolled slowly through the gates of my headquarters, and the person who stepped out of the driver's seat was someone I had not seen or heard from since the night I was left outside in the cold. The moment the driver removed her sunglasses, I immediately recognized my older sister Victoria, even though the confident smile she used to wear had completely disappeared beneath exhaustion and worrying that seemed to have aged her far beyond her years. She looked around the enormous service yard where cranes, heavy machinery, and dozens of technicians worked with quiet precision, and it was obvious from the confusion on her face that she believed she had arrived at the wrong address. I walked toward her wearing the same style of work clothes I had always preferred, with welding gloves hanging from my belt and fresh grease still covering my hands after finishing a repair only minutes earlier, while she stared at me as though she could not decide whether I was an employee or simply someone who could point her in the right direction. Without asking how I had been or apologizing for the years of silence, she hurriedly explained that she needed to meet the owner of Iron Summit Engineering because her visit involved a business matter that could not wait another day. Her voice trembled as she admitted that our father construction company had been hiding serious financial problems for years, and after several failed investments and expensive legal disputes, the business was now drowning in debt with almost no chance of surviving on its own. Banks were refusing additional loans, long-time suppliers had stopped extending credit, and the only remaining hope was convincing a wealthy investor to purchase a controlling share before everything they owned disappeared forever. Victoria clutched a thick folder filled with contracts, financial reports, and legal documents while nervously explaining that she had been told the founder of Iron Summit Engineering had built one of the fastest-growing industrial companies in the region and was known for rescuing struggling businesses when the numbers made sense. She glanced around impatiently before asking if I could introduce her to the owner because every passing minute increased the chance that another creditor would seize what remained of our family business. I listened without interrupting, feeling none of the anger I once imagined I would carry forever because time had quietly replaced bitterness with clarity, and I realized the people standing before me were no longer powerful enough to control my emotions or my future. After a brief silence, I simply nodded, invited Victoria to follow me across the property toward the modern glass headquarters overlooking the entire facility, while she remained completely unaware that the meeting she had desperately traveled across the country to request was already beginning. The employees we passed greeted me with genuine respect, calling me by name and updating me on projects that were moving ahead of schedule, yet Victoria barely noticed because she assumed they were simply being polite to another experienced technician who had worked there for years. As we entered the executive building, she admired the polished marble floors, the framed engineering awards, and the photographs of completed industrial projects hanging along the walls, never once imagining that every success displayed there had been built by the brother her family had dismissed as a disappointment. When we reached the top floor, I unlocked a large office overlooking the entire manufacturing campus and calmly walked inside without hesitation, while Victoria stopped in the doorway with a puzzled expression as though she expected the real owner to arrive at any moment. I placed my work gloves on the desk, sat comfortably in the executive chair, and invited her to take a seat before quietly explaining that the founder, president, and majority owner of Iron Summit Engineering was not another businessman waiting somewhere else because she had been speaking to him the entire time. For several long seconds she remained completely speechless as the folders slipped from her hands and scattered important documents across the polished floor, while her eyes moved from my face to the company awards, then back to the name engraved on the desk that matched the signature printed across every contract she carried. The disbelief was so overwhelming that she pulled out her phone with trembling hands, opened the old family group conversation that had been silent to me for years, and sent a single photograph of me sitting behind the desk with one short message telling everyone they needed to see the truth. Immediately. Less than a minute later her phone began vibrating nonstop as incoming calls and messages flooded the screen faster than she could dismiss them, and the expressions on her face changed from confusion to complete panic as one relative after another demanded answers about the shocking discovery. She finally answered a video call from our mother, whose voice suddenly sounded sweeter than I had ever remembered, and she begged Victoria to turn the camera toward me because she could hardly believe the son they had pushed away had become the successful businessman now holding the future of their company in his hands. My mother smiled through the screen with carefully chosen words about family, forgiveness, and second chances, insisting that they had missed me every single day, and that the past should remain in the past because families were meant to stay together through difficult times. I quietly listened until she finished speaking, then leaned forward and calmly reminded her that respect cannot suddenly appear when money disappears, because the son who had once been left outside the gate had built his future without their help, and the decisions I made next would depend on justice rather than guilt. I calmly explained that I had no interest in revenge because carrying hatred for 7 years would have only chained me to the worst day of my life, yet I also refused to pretend that the wounds they created had magically disappeared simply because they finally needed something from me. I reminded them that success had not changed who I was inside, but it had taught me the value of self-respect, and that was one thing I would never sacrifice again for the approval of people who had once treated me as if I were invisible. After reviewing every financial record in the folder, I made one final business proposal that would protect innocent employees while holding my family responsible for their own choices, explaining that my company would purchase the remaining assets only if every outstanding worker received full payment and every dishonest executive immediately stepped away from management. My father argued at first, believing he still had the right to negotiate from a position of strength, but reality quickly caught up with him when his own attorneys admitted that my offer was the only reason the company had any chance of surviving at all. Several months later, the agreement was complete, and while the old family business disappeared forever, hundreds of hard-working employees kept their jobs under new leadership because I refused to let their futures be destroyed by mistakes they had never made. My parents moved into a smaller home, my brother accepted an ordinary management position at another company, and Victoria eventually reached out with a sincere apology that asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to slowly rebuild the trust our family had broken so many years earlier. As for me, I continued expanding Iron Summit Engineering into new cities while creating a training program that offered scholarships, apprenticeships, and free professional tools to young men and women who wanted to build careers in the skilled trades, because I never forgot what it felt like when someone judged my worth by the dirt on my hands instead of the strength of my character. Every time I watched another apprentice gain confidence, earn a certification, and build a better future through honest work, I felt a quiet sense of pride that no amount of wealth could ever replace, proving that the greatest success is not measured by money but by the lives you help change along the way. Looking back now, I no longer remember the freezing night outside that locked gate with bitterness because it became the unexpected beginning of the life I was always meant to live. And sometimes the door that closes in front of you is actually pushing you toward a future far greater than the one you were desperately trying to hold on to. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family.